Good day, everyone. Welcome to Leprechaun Alley. My name is Ray Carey I sometimes I say Ray Carey Merkaba. Ray Carey Perillo.
My name is Michael P. Perillo.
So today, I wanted to start by saying we're trying to get better at helping people along, understand what we're doing, and we're just kind of shooting from the hip ourselves. So I wanted to let you know, first of all, the services that we provide. We have a link below. And also remember to like and subscribe. That would be so helpful. And thank you. Um, we have a link below the services that we provide, or general astrology readings. We will provide like private astrology reading using Western, Chinese, and Vedic astrology. Just let us know what your preference is. We also provide a little cute mini service if you just want to request your personal mantra from your birth name. We can also just do that, and we'll just send you a quick email and it's a little mantra that you can use. Additionally, we offer Soul Recovery, which is a program that lasts 12 weeks or 3 months, somewhere in there. And what this is a process to go through deep internal awareness. It's kind of based on the 12 steps from AA, which ironically also got their inspiration from the Theosophical Society. And it's come full circle by this woman named Esther Nicholson, who created a way to deal with the metaphysical, subtle aspects of our nature using 12 keys, really toward enlightenment and self-love.
Well, one other thing is this casting for today is scheduled to be about an hour. Sometimes when we do live readings, we might get more than what we think in terms of volume of people that might ask questions. So it could last as much as an hour and a half. We try to keep them not more than an hour and a half so that you can digest the information a little bit more readily. We will continue to talk about astrology, astrological signs, to show you the relationship between the signs and the various things that occur in society, the various issues that human beings have. We'll discuss sometimes politicians or actors and actresses. To give you an example of what we are talking about with astrology, so that you can look for yourself and see if you see the qualities that we talk about when we associate with people and their astrological signs. So, Carrie, would you like to start with today's issue is about the last three signs that we didn't cover. And again, we'll go back over it many times with more information about astrology. But for now, we're giving you a short example of how you interpret people through their sun signs. And I guess we stopped with Sagittarius. So we're going to start with Capricorn, and Carrie will chime in from time to time, as I will, so that we can cover it as thoroughly as possible. So you want to start with Capricorn?
I do, but I have one question for you, and I would really like you to share because it's incredible. Why did we choose the name Leprechaun Alley?
Well, Leprechaun Alley was chosen because of an experience that I had in a church many, many years ago. I was probably around 12 years old. We believed that we saw a leprechaun, and it was three children, three friends of mine that I guess we could still be considered children at 12, 13. I'm
Absolutely.
not sure. But there were three of the boys that were asked to get chairs out of the auditorium in the church. And then when they went down, they saw what appeared to be some kind of a leprechaun.
You heard, yeah, like when you were coming, didn't you hear a kerfuffle? Didn't you hear a lot of racket going on? Right, yeah.
Then the
It's just the coolest story.
the nun asked me to go and help the other three. When I entered the church to go down to the auditorium, all of a sudden I heard chairs falling everywhere on the floor. and the three children running out, and they ran out past me without telling me anything. They were scared as all hell, I would have to say, and they went to the nun to tell her, and I followed to find out more information from them why they were running. When I went out of the church, the entrance to the auditorium, I noticed that my cousin, who was one of the three boys, he was getting smacked around by the nun, and of course, that was a great alarm for me because
Right.
my mother did horrible punishments to me all the time. I didn't want any part of it, so I went back into the church, and that's when I started hearing something moaning very loud. It was echoes all around because the auditorium was about as big as the church. It's where they had other things going on when they have parties or special events. That this is where they went, and uh, in that basement there were steps that went down on either side of the church. So you had two set of steps to go down from one side of the church and then from the other, but they only kept one side open all the time, because that's where the light controls were. So that was we're entering from the side where the rectory was. I started to hear this loud sound. The problem that I had with that was that our experience with that loud sound was almost all the time, because many of the times we would have what they called catechisms. Catechism was a study of Catholic ways and means, and the philosophy and the stories, and that's how we were taught religion. And when we were doing that, there would always be several boys that would they cut the classroom. We started at 2 o'clock and play hooky. And we thought that that sound that we would hear. I failed to mention that when you enter the church on either side, you come in and there's a doorway going into the balcony, or you have to go to the let's say to the right of the door to the balcony, and you go down the stairs. Down. So in any event, I entered in the balcony is where we would also have instructions. And I mentioned the balcony because we would hear this moaning when we were doing the class, and people would laugh, thinking, well, there was one of the kids playing hooky. How he got into the church, we never could explain, but we thought that's what it was. Well, I'm entering the church now on this day where I was asked to help the other three to pick up chairs. They were busy getting hit by the nun while they were trying to tell the nun what they saw. I didn't know at all what they saw. I didn't even know they saw anything. I just simply went into the church, and as I was going down into the church, well, I had an experience. And I think for the benefit of those who are waiting to hear the last three signs, I think we'll finish that, and I'll finish the story because it is lengthy,
Absolutely.
and you'll understand why I came up with the title Leprechaun.
And by the way, we would love you to share any of your mystical experience in
Mhm.
the comments below.
Right.
We really just want a
And we'll compare
community,
that.
yeah, of connection
We'll
and
compare that with
integrity.
their astrological signs as well.
Exactly. So, and you can always, if you're not able to join us live, you can also leave your birth data in the comments below, and we'll look at that and we'll read it. So right
Right.
now it's not too crazy, so I don't have 60,000 comments yet to do. So we want to do this right now as long as we possibly can.
So we'll continue from the sign where we stopped. We stopped with the sign Sagittarius. So we'll go on to Capricorn. Capricorn. It is the seventh. I got that wrong. It's the 10th sign of the zodiac. And the reason I mentioned what house it occupies is because that tells you also about the sign and how it has to behave. Well, Capricorn, we consider it an earth sign in the West. In China, it corresponds, uh, let me elaborate on the Eastern philosophy. The Eastern philosophy is a driven by a lunar events. The moon determines the length of the year. As with the Western astrology, it's the sun. The sun occupies 12 different months in the year. The Chinese system, which is properly called terrestrial astrology. That is based on 12 years, as there are 12 signs, each one occupying 1 year of time. So, having said that, Capricorn, then, as I've also already mentioned, it's an earth sign. It is represented by the mountain goat, whereas in the Chinese system, the Capricorn represents the buffalo, is represented by the year of the buffalo. In the United States, we call that year the year of the ox, because at the time that it was brought here by Admiral Perry, he is the one that brought the Eastern philosophy. He took it from Japan, which has identical system as China. It is from Japan that it came here to this country. When it came to this country, people were familiar with an ox, and they then decided to call the buffalo the ox, which is the same sign. Did you want to add to anything I said about that?
Yeah, I think what's incredible about that, I've been thinking about this a lot, is really how we all universally comprehend the animals and their behavior. And we can, let's say, maybe you don't have a water buffalo on your side of the planet, but the energy and the behavior is similar. And when you go somewhere else, somebody else can also identify that by acknowledging their beasts of burden, for example, as well, and understand that the responsibility and the hard work that goes into this.
Well, when we say that it is
Which is also, and the intersection of that awareness is where we're all connected. We share this.
when we give a particular animal through the Chinese system, it's not fixed just that animal, but animals that belong in that family. For instance, the elk is considered part of the sort of like what the Chinese were talking about with buffalo. The deer would be considered in that realm, the buffalo. And one of the things we know about these animals is that they are basically shy, but they're very powerful and they're very big.
Right.
But deers are not notoriously known as attack animals.
Right.
They have beautiful eyes, beautiful movement, very swift. The buffalo is very swift. Perhaps the elephant belongs in this group, but they're not very swift, but they're very powerful and they run pretty fast for their size. So now we should go on to what does this all mean? What is the
Oh, and the ruling planet is Saturn.
the ruling planet? Every sign has a planet that rules them. Saturn happens to be the ruler of Capricorn as well as Aquarius. And when we look at Saturn, it deals with everything going on in a slow motion. Lessons have to be learned. One begins at the bottom, almost like a serf. They're considered almost wasted to the society until they have gone through the process of becoming educated in their minds, mature, and they become, at the end of this, so important that we can call them Christ figures.
Right.
And the term Christ rules the 10th house. So all this information on astrology is mathematically put together. This is not just things that came out of somebody's head 2, 3, 4, maybe 5,000 years ago. Actually, science says that man is only 5,000 years old. But in our discussions as we go on, we will make the case that man is far, far older than 5,000 years. In fact, maybe 500,000 or maybe 500 million. It wouldn't make a difference because, as we will discuss, that when we look at the zodiac, it indicates one thing. There's a certain kind of infinity that we don't necessarily account for.
At least not from a 3D
No.
philosophical or systemic way,
Right.
because I have to say this, by the way. Um, well, so yeah, so Capricorn, what I think is so interesting, right, is that it represents a portion of the Christ consciousness, and also King
Mhm.
Arthur,
Right.
another
The
figure,
King Arthur would be
right?
the mythological figure representing what Capricorn is ready to do and what their purpose is.
This is somebody who is responsible,
Mhm.
but they
Great
don't.
thing, responsibility.
Right, but it's not, they don't come and say to you, "I am a responsible person." It's who they are. They're reflective, they're receptive, and it can be incredibly difficult because they're the real ruler. The real ruler is supposed to be invisible. They're supposed to take in the responsibility. They're not supposed to be seen. They're supposed to be humble and responsible.
The buffalo is said to have great responsibility.
Right.
In Western astrology, the buffalo has to keep order in society. Its purpose is to keep a society together and coherent. So we did mention when we were in the sign Libra that Libra creates the law, where Capricorn, the buffalo, is the one who administers the law. So we find that the buffaloes is represented by great uh, bodies of strength. For instance, uh, things like hospitals, the police department, the fire department, great schools, anything that has structure,
Institutions,
institutions
government. This
that
is
have
government.
power.
Yes.
That is right. And they administer the laws that are created to make certain to it that they're fair and that all men follow these. So the buffalo is responsible. I consider the buffalo the one who treads the mountain in slow fashion and carries on no matter what goes on around him or
They
her.
shoulder the burden.
They shoulder the burden. And ultimately, if you were to discuss Capricorn on a negative level, they become the bossy ones. They're the ones that push their weight around in terms of their strength and the position that they have. They would be tending to deliver things at a level that society has to appreciate and respect. So when you vote for someone, you're actually performing a quality that belongs to the buffalo. Well, the buffalo is the one who knows everything, and he will insist that he's sort of the captain, the boss, you might say. Now, we've heard the term the boss, that applies to Capricorn. We haven't said yet what Capricorn is represented by in the East. Capricorn, which is the buffalo, we mentioned that. So we see that the buffalo in the 10th house is concerned about what's going on outside the house, his own home. He's concerned about what goes on in society.
Right.
So he tends to muscle people around on the very negative side. Well, at least he posits himself as the authority, and he is sort of the boss. We have a musician who they refer to as the boss.
Right. Yeah.
And it happens that he is a Libra by sun sign, and he is the buffalo by year, 1949 buffalo, and that is Bruce Springsteen. And his band called him the boss. He was known as the boss.
I think like another really interesting example that I feel like the Capricorn quality is prominent is Denzel Washington,
Right.
who is a Capricorn year of the
Of
horse.
course, right.
He carries a certain knowing, a certain facility, a certain
A level of
cleverness
dignity.
within him. Yeah, incredibly dignified.
Right, right.
There is a tendency, as we all know, for Capricorns to also suffer from depression profoundly because they internalize, they're here
Well,
to be
success is important to
right.
them.
Success is important, a responsibility for the society around them. They're always looking for ways to problem solve and make things better and make everybody else's life better. But at the same time, if somebody isn't cooperating with them, they're not too happy
Well,
about that.
they'll if they don't get depressed, and usually the ones who are in a position to exercise power, but then the Capricorn simply creates the law to deal with those who are irregular or
Right.
just not cooperating. But in either case, the Capricorn is the one who learns slowly, and he will intuit much of his knowledge. But the way he learns is to see how laws affect mankind and how they're administered. So they really want to keep order. If there's depression, it also is, uh, you might say it's created by the fact that they they understand their purpose in life by what they see happening in society. And so they
Right.
become the ones.
Saturn is one of the social
So
planets.
great leaders in religion would be under the sign Capricorn, the
Right.
Christ, such as the Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. Um, there are others that are less known. So when we can tell you more about them, we will. But for the time being, I mentioned the ones that we all know about.
And I also wanted to add the Buffalo or the Capricorn. The Capricorns, they can be gullible because the nature is in earnest. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, I mean, they're so connected. That's what they are. When you look at the story of King Arthur, at the end of the day, what
He's
happened to
deceived.
Guinevere?
He's deceived
That's
by
right.
Guinevere. According to the Eastern philosophers, the buffalo is very sincere in his approach in giving the rules of law. That is for the positive type. But he is not prepared when someone deceives him or lies to him because he is so adamantly connected with the idea that he is doing the right thing.
Yes.
And that's why he sort of gets called the boss because he knows everything and he's in charge. And because he believes he knows everything, when perhaps a woman is telling him that he loves she loves him, he doesn't account for the possibility that she might not be sincere or that that love is based on something other than from the feeling in their heart. So when he is cheated on by the woman
Mm.
or abandoned by the woman, such as in the case of King Arthur, both things happened. He was cheated on, and eventually King Arthur had to separate from her because he was brokenhearted. He's shocked more by the fact that he was fooled because the buffalo looks at the world from what is going on the outside. That is why his orientation is about large institutions, people, organizations that have tremendous responsibility insofar as a society is concerned. So this is where he sees everything. He's also very pragmatic. You'll find many scientists coming from the sign Capricorn because they have this ability to plod along continuously. If they're looking for something, they will go on almost indefinitely until they've found a solution or they've created one.
By the way, there's one more Capricorn that I'm thinking about. Michael isn't as familiar. This is from my 80s days. I am a true 80s child. I am the 80s. um, is the Eurythmics. Annie Lennox is also a Capricorn, year of the horse. And when you look at, she has this beautiful voice. And when you look at her lyrics and you look at the way that she constructs her music, even when she's singing, she actually uses her own voice to create harmony. There's something about her music that feels responsible and deep. You check out the Eurythmics sometime. It's really interesting. Capricorns really have such a beautiful way of expressing themselves.
Well,
And they're really underappreciated.
this can come only from a Capricorn who has exceeded the boundaries
Right.
of Capricorn. Because
Yes.
Capricorn is concerned about the effects going on outside himself. And if he's a good musician, it's that he has turned that energy towards himself in a
Right.
manner that other people in society understand. Capricorn is always looking for some unified field of people where there is a similar desire, a similar way of looking at things. And so they can, when they do develop music, they can be more effective than other people because their orientation is coming from the heart
Yes.
rather than just from their
In
minds.
earnest. Right, there's actually one of the songs that she wrote, it's called When Tomorrow Comes. Part one of the lyrics or is actually one of the lines is actually, "And you know that I'm going to be the one who'll be there when you need someone to depend upon."
Mm.
That's she articulates it beautifully. That is Capricorn.
Now, we talked about Capricorn being responsible and
I get emotional about them.
considering themselves an authority. Well, in astrology, Capricorn represents the house of the, or the sign of the father in the family. He's the father figure.
Yes.
He's the one that comes from the outside and brings the goods that he has captured, food that he has hunted for, or the berries that he's collected. He brings him to the home where the female, which is ruled by the opposite of Capricorn, which is Cancer, uh, distributes these goods to everybody around her. And that is how these two signs are supposed to work. One is oriented to the family and what is familiar. That would be the sign Cancer. The other one is going to deliver according to what he sees as tendencies in society and how these tendencies can be better served with certain laws that account for punishment of those who disturb the rules of the society and to reward those who are doing the right thing.
Right, it's ultimately guidelines to live by, right? Like the 10 Commandments,
Right, the Ten
you
Commandments
know?
under Capricorn.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Those are the 10th house rules.
It's marvelous.
So the 10th house would be where you would look for a Buddha. You would look for someone who is a very great religious leader. As we said, that the Christ figure belongs to those who are conscious of the overall tendencies of the society, and their input is to improve it or to bring inspiration, such as what the people who are religious, that's their purpose, is to bring something of value that will make all people comfortable. Can you go and tell them?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll be right back. I'm sorry. We almost had it today.
So, staying with the sign Capricorn, what we find with Capricorn is that oftentimes we will see someone who looks rather solid, but yet he's still light enough to climb mountains. That means that these people are sort of well built or proportionately built. They can uh, appeal to many, many people as opposed to just more intimate. Let's, for example, go to the sign Cancer, which is the opposite of Capricorn. Cancer wants to deal with what's going on in their heart and at home, and whether their home is safe or not safe. But those are the type, because they are the what's going on the inside, as opposed to Capricorn paying attention on the outside. So let's have some water.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the cat my cat was laying on the remote, and she just turned the television on, it was very loud. I don't know, she's Year of the Buffalo, maybe she wanted to chime in or something with us. There's always fun little synchronicities that
Possible.
happen.
Yes, you can assign the name as assigns to the animal, and you can sort of give an idea of behavior, but it's not like with human beings because human beings are far more complicated in the way they think and the way they act. So, did we say enough about Capricorn? Should we
Yeah, I
move
think
on?
maybe it's time to talk about Aquarius.
So
Also Saturn.
So we moved from Capricorn to Aquarius, but at one time I gave the information on how the signs were distributed in the zodiac and how the planets got assigned to each of the signs. But we can repeat that. Maybe you should give a brief for those who haven't heard that.
Yeah.
The way that astrology, uh, planets were assigned to the astrological signs were that it was the ancients took the sun and the moon as being almost like one planet, because the moon derives its light from the sun. So these two were put in the middle of the zodiac, which is between Capricorn and Cancer and Leo.
Yes.
So Leo took the sun as its ruler, and Cancer took the moon as its ruler. So we can ask, first of all, what are the differences between those two? Well, you would think that the sun is really strongest, and astrologers say that's the most important planet. And we call it a planet only to make it easier to discuss the 10 planets.
Right. Like Pluto is still a planet in
Right.
astrology. Right, too.
Just because they,
Yeah.
they move around and their orbits is predictable, and we know, and we can add them into the aspects they make and the aspects of the positions they make. It's like you're walking and there's somebody behind you or in front of you, to your side, to your right side, to the left. The left may be contain different objects that you are drawn to. The right would have its own. So there would be a difference in their position. And that's what the aspects mean, how planets are facing each other, and what does this all mean? So having said this about Cancer and Capricorn, Cancer deals with the inner feelings. It's the mother principle. It's the principle of being comfortable, of avoiding all negativities. Capricorn would be the sign that takes responsibilities, regardless of how painful that responsibility may be. And so it's no wonder that one can almost consider many of the Capricorns having a certain kind of either severe or tortured look upon
Or
them.
melancholy, yeah,
Melancholy appearance or behavior, because their value is measured by how successful they are in a society, and not just about going to work. Capricorn means the status of where you are. For instance, we look at Virgo, and Virgo is a sign of occupation. It's a sign of obligation and being in a position where they must serve and they must work. Capricorn instead will deliver. They're in charge. They're usually found as the people in charge of companies, no matter how small. It's under the sign Capricorn. And because they're in charge, they have far more responsibility, and they're more because of that, they're severe in their approach, usually because they're not allowed to really make errors. At least Capricorn would find that very shameful if they were to fail.
Right, they're very hard on themselves.
It would be as the goat would trip on a mountain. This is not heard of, and it's we take this failure very seriously, almost to the point of suicide. So Capricorn, of course, we have the negative Capricorn. Some of the greatest, the most notorious gangsters, I believe Capone.
Yeah.
Capone was a Capricorn.
But he lived by a very strict code.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he was, for those who don't know it, he was a gangster during the Roaring '20s in Chicago. He was located. And he was when I was growing up.
I didn't even realize he was a Capricorn.
Yeah, when I was growing up, when I was growing up, we knew all about the gangsters. I grew up starting the late '40s through the '60s. Was when I got most of my education. Or actually, I could go further through the '70s, the middle '70s, when I completed college somewhere in early '70s. So. What we were going to go on to Aquarius. So Aquarius is the 11th sign. The house itself that they occupy is about hopes and gains. It's about achieving things at a different level. Their whole concept is based on how they perceive themselves apart from society. Oftentimes astrologers will refer to Aquarius as the man who has one foot on the ground, so he's sound in his ideas, he's ruled by Saturn, and one foot in space, so he is involved in inventions, he's involved in things that affect us from afar, for instance, telecommunication, television, the telephone, we're doing things from a great distance, and most of the times we don't have a notion as to how or why, but we use these things, and we're confident that when we're talking on the phone, that we're talking to the people that we know. It's just that they are sort of spatial, and oftentimes you will find that Aquarius tends to be aloof. But we should describe it. What Aquarius is ruled by Saturn,
Right.
and what sign does it occupy in the Eastern sign?
And also by Uranus. In Western, they usually work with Uranus, which is revolutionary.
I call it Uranus, by the way, but nobody wants to have their anus talked about.
I know. Or maybe,
So,
well, we do now.
so now you'll hear astrologers.
And welcome, awesome Rohan.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good to see you.
So now astrologers refer to Uranus as Uranus. So it doesn't sound like we're talking about somebody's anus.
I don't know. We may as well just be childish. Just deal with it and accept it. Sometimes we just have to be. I understand. Why not?
So Aquarius is because it's in the 11th house. It's about gains. Gains are usually coming from places that are not really known,
Right.
because we're dealing with something which is separated from us. So Aquarius deals with things of knowledge. In fact, most people think Aquarius is an air sign, a water sign,
Right.
because Aquarius is seen as the man bearing water, and the water is being poured. Now, what water represented to the ancients, and even science can probably validate this, and that it is an element of creation. It's considered wisdom as being captured by water. There's an intelligent force which allows everything to grow, including human beings, trees, plants. Everything requires water. So this is what Aquarius is called, the water bearer, meaning that he occupies the house of knowledge, and he is spreading or inseminating knowledge with his big container. He's pouring water or knowledge over society. So he's the one who knows. Oftentimes, if you have friends that are under the sign Aquarius, you will note that they tend to say, I know, I know, I know.
Mm.
You see this happening with a lot of people. It's not as if we are questioning someone and telling them, because we know their sign, and telling them, you should say, I know. They don't. It's just one of the qualities they have.
I wanted to also add about the Aquarius. One of the colloquialisms that we use and that we're familiar with is, does your argument bear water?
That's right.
Does it have structure?
Right.
Does it have legs? That's Aquarius.
Right. Bearing water means it has the knowledge to withstand anything. Unlike some of the other signs that might mean whether they have the structure or the physical strength. With Aquarius, it has to do, bearing water is to whether it bears knowledge. So Aquarius,
it also represents friendship,
right,
relationships, because that's in the house of gains and associates.
So Aquarius' secondary ruler is Uranus. That's another way of saying it instead of Uranus. It's that planet represents futuristic things. It represents
technology, right?
So,
earthquakes, disruption.
Yeah, if the sudden changes. If you look at Uranus in a chart, we're measuring social change, not individual change, because Uranus takes much longer to go through a sign. So it would take 7 years before you could really make comment over how that planet affected an individual. So we use only from the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Those are the ones that we use. And the others are the ones that we use for personality changes or events going on. The other,
right, Uranus is referring to the larger populations, the entire collective.
Right, the outer planets are considered to affect societies, to affect ages, what took place during that age. For instance, we are ending the Piscean age.
Right.
and moving into Aquarius. The ages move backwards.
Well, but at the same time, we still have about 400 years before we move into
Right.
Aquarius.
But
But
we'll start to-
relatively speaking,
we start
we're
to-
toward the end.
We're
Pisces, yeah.
feeling Aquarius with
Yeah.
all the activity going on with telephones, with computers that you can hold in your hand, with spatial
Right.
travel, and the interest in space.
Steve
To
Jobs.
look into such things as the they call it the ancient aliens,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of evidence that what took place on the earth many thousand years ago, certainly far more than 5,000, uh, couldn't have, some of these things just could not have been created by mankind at the level that man is even today. They cannot be created. So the Aquarius represents these hopes and wishes, things that are far from being able to be touched and talked about physically. They're in the mind of the Aquarian. So we go back to what is Aquarius' element. The element is air, and the air element, the 3 air signs.
And this is a fixed air.
Right. We have three
Important.
air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. They represent the activities of the intellect, of the mind, at various ends. For instance, a Gemini intellect is concerned with, let's say, communication, verbal communication. They rule the body. They rule as the lungs, and they express themselves through through their ability to speak and move with their hands. So they rule the hands and the shoulders and the arms. Libra rules the small of the back, and it deals with balance, and the small of the back
Also
is what,
the kidneys.
the kidneys, and the small of the back is what we use for balancing ourselves. So Librans will have any areas that are going to be weak. Usually, going to indicate that the something about the lower spine. And then we have Aquarius as another air sign. So Libran intellect is about contracts. It's about agreements.
Yes, right.
It's
Partnership.
about promises people make to each other.
Right.
Where Gemini was simply to communicate.
That's right.
To brothers and sisters, to those who are there familiar with. So we go from Gemini to Libra, and we then end up with Aquarius, which this communication is about remote things that are going on. It is the wishes and dreams of people on how they may affect each other.
The Tesla technology is very Aquarian.
Right. Exactly, because it deals with that which hasn't been seen or touched. It was Tesla that was advocating the power be used by the whole world, because they could move the electrical energy through space from one town to another.
I wanted to say, like Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
He was an Aquarius, and I just
no.
Oh, he wasn't. I thought Steve Jobs was.
But he did what he did in the Aquarian age.
He wasn't Aquarius?
Steve Jobs happened to be a Pisces, and
was he a Pisces? That's right.
Right, and there's a different form of intelligence with Pisces.
See, I see. You're going to see us like me be confused right in camera, because
that's
part of the fun.
because astrology is very complex. It really is, and there are reasons for her saying Pisces, and when we get to Pisces, we'll discuss that as well. And in any event, getting back to Aquarius, Aquarius is not notorious for being a good partner in marriage, because he's aloof. His mind, as it's been said, he has one foot on land and another one in space. So his mind seems to be separated from his activities or responsibilities. They close up, or they clam up, or they tend to stay away from where all the activities are obvious. Everybody is in the mulling around, all kinds of activities, the bubbling of society occurs all around him. And so the Beatles, for those who remember the Beatles, they sang a song that was about Aquarius, and that was the song called "Fool on the Hill." And he looks at mankind, and the world is going round and round, and meanwhile he's missing all of the activity. He becomes the fool. He loses out on the love and the effort and the sweat and tears that mankind goes through.
The
to
reward.
be who they are. Can I have some water, please?
Sure.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Oh,
So you can go on.
Ashton Kutcher. Ashton Kutcher
Mhm.
is Aquarius. He's hero of the horse. He has a really high IQ, like 160. He's brilliant. And I find Aquarians, what I like to focus on when I talk about Aquarians is the aspect of friendship in that nature because they
Well,
represent friendship.
that house rules friendships,
Right,
the
they
11th
represent
house.
friendship, and it's an ideal, and there is a contemplation. They think, they know. They internally always have a structure that they formulate that.
Now, with Capricorn, when we say Aquarius has the friendships, people that they come to know.
Right,
With Capricorn, it's about the world leaders. It's
yes,
about people who have authority. That is who they associate with. So you see a difference between the 10th house and the 11th house. What we
right.
didn't mention is what sign the terrestrial astrology, what sign occupies
Oh,
the
yes,
sign
very
Aquarius.
important. That would
So,
be Year of the Tiger.
correct.
I have a lot of tigers in my family, and they're wonderful.
What is known about the tiger, if one visits a zoo, as such as we have one here in the Bronx, it's a big zoo.
Yeah, it's
And
incredible.
when you get to
My family is a zoo.
when you get to the tiger
Mm,
display, it tells you there, and you can see it because you can see tigers in the background. That tigers do not like to be next to each other, whether they're male or female. They prefer to be apart because they see the world from a different viewpoint. They are in
there's always, yeah, a part of themselves that they keep back.
in the chart. The 11th house and
Mhm.
Aquarius also represents anarchy.
Yes,
Down with the
love
old and
anarchy.
up with the new, because the new has to be expressed in order for society to go forward. Imagine that we think that 5,000 years ago we ran around with clubs and animal skin wrapped around us.
I think we had Mesopotamia well on the way, though.
But evidence now shows that if there was such a thing as a caveman, it would have been maybe into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago because of what is being uncovered under the ocean, under the sands, and what is visible on the sands. They're beginning to look at them from another point of view. And they're looking at the fact that they didn't have machinery, and most of these structures could not have been built, even if they had machinery, certainly machinery
Right,
that we're not familiar with.
right. I really want to point out that as we go through the signs, we are discussing a progression in consciousness and our spiritual development. So by the time we get to Aquarius, and it doesn't mean that the sun sign Aquarius has gotten there because we're organized. We're also organized in a way that supports us in fulfilling our dharma.
He occupies the house of hopes and wishes and
Right.
friendships. And look at the tiger. What do the Chinese say about the tiger? You and the tiger make good friends. Aquarius is known as somewhat benefic and that he will make friends with people. He will get together with people that inspire his ideas, that show that something can be created to a greater thing. So, what the Chinese say about the tiger is that they make great friends.
Until one of you gets hungry
That's right.
and you know who will eat.
Exactly. So these are things that we think about when we are interpreting signs, and now you're getting an idea, small taste of signs. We're not going that deep because becomes confusing after a while when you're trying to remember 12 signs in two different systems of zodiac.
I wanted to further elaborate on the signs representing our spiritual development as we progress.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I always think about with Aquarians is that they are great friends, and typically they don't abandon them because they're already self contained. However, they also won't go along with some crazy scheme that you're doing if they don't feel comfortable with it.
But we know that Aquarians can
So,
be referred to as the oddballs.
right, right. So what really happens, and by the way, you can talk to an Aquarian, they will listen to you, they
Mhm.
will give you the
Oh,
time
yeah.
of day, And the only thing that matters to them is their thoughts. They may disagree with you and you may never know. And Michael disagrees with me in terms of what I think the most stubborn sign is, but I think, and I'll give my argument. I really want to give a good argument for why I view Aquarius as the most stubborn sign. Because if you can't persuade somebody and you don't even have access to whether or not you're persuading them at all, there's no way for you to know if you've affected change or be persuasive. There's a way that Aquarians express themselves, or what I say is the Aquarian, they will come visit you in prison. And in contrast, right, to the Leo, who's also in the subjective mode, the Leo will help you bury the bodies. So what's happened is once we get to this 11th sign, we've evolved to a point where we know that we need to advance and move forward and that we're moving toward the primordial ocean, the consciousness. But because this is very stubborn until we get to Pisces, and that's when the great surrender happens.
So I have something to say about this.
So I just want to wrap this up by saying, so in a spiritual realm, we get to a point where we're connected to all this knowledge and awareness.
Astrology can be very complex because it can be interpreted many, many, many ways. Carrie says that Aquarius is the most fixed sign, and I disagree with her.
There was a further point that I wanted to wrap it up.
And the reason is because Aquarius is an air sign, number one. Number two, Aquarius is about hopes and dreams, and they listen. That's the first thing that stubborn people don't do. So they listen, and you can persuade them after they've had an argument with you, and they learn from that.
Sure.
If you're looking for a fixed sign that defies all help and wants to go their way, it would be the sign Taurus.
Yes.
Because it is an earth sign, it is a fixed sign, and if Taurus fails, well, that part of the season is what allows everything to grow. So there is a certain level of fixation. And you will find that those who are Taurians are the ones who will, if they are stuck on breaking the rules, you're not going to change their minds all that easy.
Sure.
It is ruled by the snake, and as far as China is concerned.
Easy. And
the snake has this incredible patience to wait until it's time that they can strike to get you. They can sit there looking at you, and they're waiting for a moment that is most opportune. This requires an ability to be extremely steady and affixed to what you're doing. And as I said before, it is ruled by Earth, and it is a fixed sign. And Earth signs are more fixed than would be the air and the fire. Well, fire would be very fixed as well as an element, only as an element, but not as fire signs. So this gets complex, and we'll try to, as you hear us give each viewpoint from different aspects, you'll start to realize that trying to interpret astrology can get very confusing.
So to finish up my point about spiritual evolution as we move through the signs, that they all represent different realms of consciousness and development for us. Once we finally get to the point of final liberation, that's where we receive and deal with energetically the most challenges, the most complex events that we have to face and process, because we have to take all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge that we've developed over time. And this is where the rubber hits the road. So for me, that's my philosophical position, because it's always darkest before the dawn. And I find Taurians much easier to manipulate than tigers.
Well, but that doesn't mean.
And for me, if I can manipulate some, and I don't want to do that, because I don't mean that. I love Taurians, and that's how I manipulate them, if you want to call it that. But it's very difficult for me to move an Aquarius.
But that's not a basis to claim that Aquarius is the most fixed, because you can. Aquarius is up, down with the old, and up with the new. That doesn't sound too fixed to me. But anyway, let's try to move on to the sign Pisces, the last of the 12 solar signs. Again, we repeat that in Western astrology, which is Greek-Roman astrology passed down to us, There are 12 signs that the sun goes through. The sun represents the constitution, and it represents the intent of someone. Whereas the other astrological signs, they and the houses, they have various functions, which we will get to more deeply in terms of the function of the houses.
It's the 12th house.
Pisces represents the last sign of the Western zodiac, and its occupation is in the 12th house. These deal with things such as imprisonment. It deals with commitments in large organizations. If there are going to be problems, they'll occur in large organizations, because Pisces, at its negative side, represents total commotion and confusion.
Right.
It rules the open seas,
Psychedelics.
the ocean. If you fall into the ocean, you are gone in mass confusion. So Pisces is about the greater qualities of a society. The Piscean is, for instance, are sympathetic to the needs of others, and the others would be us, other people outside us, the society. Again, the last three signs really deal more with the social order,
That's
the
right.
great side of things, rather
Right.
than these more personal or more intimate events. So Pisces is about surrender. When we get to the sign Pisces, as every
Right.
sign has a saying, for instance, Capricorn says, I use, because they manipulate what is available to them through law. Aquarius says, I know, because they have accomplished a certain amount of knowledge about something, and their purpose is to disseminate knowledge. When we get to Pisces, it says, I believe. But let's understand the English language. The Anglo-Saxons didn't like to extend their language because they had plenty to say, apparently. So they came up with things that are abbreviated. Instead of, so for instance, we drop the is oftentimes with an apostrophe to indicate possession, or we have talking about the difference. You have anything to say about the difference between the way the I was talking about the ancient Anglo-Saxons in England.
Right.
So what they were saying is, when they say I believe, it was really to say I leave it be. In other words, I let it go. I surrender. So in occult sciences or parasciences, uh, the Piscean represents religious figures. And why is it that they
And
believe?
of course, Christ consciousness comes
Right,
in here
right.
as well.
So they leave it be. They leave the issues alone and they go with something. It then became I believe, which makes the idea more concrete. Because if you believe something, there's nothing more to discuss. There's really
Right.
no issue. So you surrender. Surrender. Pisces occupies the house where we would find nirvana, where you are released of all obligations. All things are dropped. You are now freed from the body. And not only nirvana, but Pisces is also a sign or the house in which um, yoga is formed. And
Union. We are all connected.
right, yoga means unified. It means one thing going on. And it's not really about exercise. This came much later. Yoga really means the ability to put mind, body, and soul in connection with each other, so they unify the field of mankind's awareness. And he becomes, you might say, a sage, or a very Christ-like figure,
Right.
or at least if he is able to transcend, he has experiences that are beyond the explanation. Because let's just take a look at the fact that they rule the ocean. If you fall in the ocean, you have no more ability to orient where you are. It's massive. So Pisces produces mass confusion, but at the same time, they also have empathy for the masses because
Right.
they sense.
And it also represents filtration. It also what happens if we're in the state of Pisces, where we're really in a state of elevated consciousness and advanced perception, are we develop, and it's the most really the only thing that we need to do in a way, we develop these profound filters. And this is the realm where we finally master the subtle by surrender.
Now, let's keep in mind when we talk about these positions, this does not mean they're exactly what people born under these signs do, but what these houses represent is what you're supposed to develop, what you're working on. It depends on what level you're at. You could be a master yogi, or you can just be a student of yogi. It's still ruled by Pisces. So interpreting this involves other aspects of the chart, bringing them together. In either case, we are in the Piscean age. We know that because we've had, during this age, which an age takes about 2,600 years for the sun to travel through, or should I say, the solar system travels through the zodiacal belt. For every 30 degrees, it's approximately 2,600 years. But we go what these are called the great ages. And for the last 2,000 years, we have been in the sign Pisces. We're talking about the whole solar system because the solar system also travels on a belt of some sort around the Milky Way. So we have everything moving in every direction at all times. So Pisces, the weakness of Pisces is to have mass confusion. The strength of Pisces is to have massive cooperation,
Full
perfection,
Right. Ascension.
Right, ascension.
And one of the things that I want to mention here, sort of because I have Neptune conjunct my sun in Sagittarius. So I always joke and say I'm a Pisces adjunct. And Michael will attest to how sensitive I am. So,
Right.
but I
Well,
want
the
to say,
sensitivity also comes from all the
I
Scorpio you have in
just
your
want to
chart.
share, right? I just want to share this one trick with you. The question is, how do you know something is a lie, that something isn't whole or something isn't truthful? Because the message to you is that you are expected to perform this act as someone who is separate and apart from the whole. And anything that encourages us to be separate and apart from the whole, that's a lie. We separate into tribes, we separate and we cling to these very strange ideas that really don't benefit us, as in our desperation to connect, which is also confusion, right? There's so much
You're
confusion.
talking something beyond just Pisces here.
Right, and I am, yes. I just
Okay.
wanted to fill this in a little bit more. So once we finally, right, like the Aquarius, when they're centered, when they've gone to the 11th house, they finally develop the skills to overcome their need for tribalism because they are enough.
Well, they're the most,
Right.
they're the loneliest sign of
Even though,
Western
right,
zodiac.
even though they're the sign of friendship. It's incredible.
They're lonely, though.
Right, they're lonely.
Aquarians
And they're
are
okay
lonely.
being alone.
That's what the fool on the hill is.
Right.
Well, it doesn't necessarily stand that they're okay with it. They just do that.
Right,
And they
right,
may wake up one day and say that was a mistake.
right.
But
Yes.
it's not because they wanted to make the mistake. It was
Right.
because they wanted to preserve what they've accomplished or learned. And they don't want to be tempted into changing their mind.
Right.
So in that aspect, Aquarius is a fixed sign and it is stubborn. But I wouldn't call it the most stubborn.
But
Because
yes,
to
so
be the
right.
most stubborn of any of the signs, you have to look at all of the positions and decide how stubborn a person is. But if I had to select one, I would go with the snake. Taurus is the snake in China.
Right.
And the snake has this uncanny ability to reach his subject, his prey,
Right.
and
Incredible
sit there
patience,
there
yes.
for hours deciding when he's going
Right.
to grab his prey.
Right.
Other,
I absolutely agree
other
with that.
signs that don't do something like that. If they're criminals, you'll find that the ones who come under the sign of the snake or Taurus can be the cruelest of all the signs, even though when they're around children, they tend to be the most gentle of all the signs. So we see that astrology has its complications when you have to deal with the opposite of what is going on. And how do they deal with their opposite viewpoint? That is what you try to interpret in the chart.
So it's a little after 2 p.m. right now. We've gone on a little bit over an hour.
So
we're going to wrap it up for
Right.
today. And I just wanted to give a shout out always. Oh, by the way, you know what? I also want to make some other recommendations. It's a really great author is Jane Roberts, by the way. Seth Speaks, and she has some really amazing material discussing the oversoul. It really is sort of a hand in glove scenario in terms of looking at that in conjunction with astrology. So, oh, welcome, Vivian. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate. Vivian said that she's learning so much from us.
Oh, good.
Wow,
Good.
we really love your feedback. Again, if you have, please share your comments. If you have a request, you can't make it to a live reading, put it in the comments below. We'll do a reading for you. You can read it later.
Yes.
Share your mystical experience. Share your philosophy. We really want to hear from you. And I want to make some recommendations when we're not on and everybody's in their spiritual mode. You want to see things. My favorite websites or my favorite speakers or channels. I'm sorry, channels. I'm not technologically savvy all the time. Black and Orange Tarot, Linda G, the Comanche Psychic, Sterling, Spirit Within, Celtic Tarot, The Way of Positive Change, Intuitive View, Third Eye Champagne, and Joni Patri, who is a Vedic astrologer. So those are some of my favorite channels, and I just want to share them with you. And you can even give me feedback. I don't know what you're talking about. What are you, nuts? Awesome. I want to hear it all.
And from time to time, we'll try to point out to certain textbooks that you might want to go in if you want to study astrology in a deeper way. However, if you listen to these podcasts, you'll probably wind up with information that you can't find in any one book.
Right.
Because I myself have had, well, since 1970 to 72, 50 years of practice with astrology. And I have also gone into deeper aspects of what astrology is, which is not really taught always in any of the books. Too many authors practice and write information that is very obvious. It's what every book has just about. But there are a lot of particulars that are not covered at all. Very rare will you find someone comparing East and Western astrologies together. There are some books, and we'll guide you to a very good one. That would be Leonora Thau.
Or Theodora Lau.
Oh, there's Theodora Lau, right.
She's an amazing,
a very good astrologer
author.
Who will tell you about Chinese astrology, and they will use the Western astrologies to compare to each of the signs. She goes further by also dealing with the elements of the signs of astrology. But we'll go through that as well.
Okay.
And then you'll learn more, and we'll repeat sometimes things so that if you've got them a little maybe off, you'll correct them, or reinforce things by repeating. So thank you for listening and watching this program.
And as always, we send you all our love and travel light.
Yes.